comedy, am I right? Well, to be more specific, comedy in cartoons. Sit down and buckle up because I've got a lot to talk about. Looney Tunes and the Merry Medleys are very well known for their slapstick and character-driven humor, along with very well-timed animation, while more modern cartoons like Star vs. the Forces of Evil, Gravity Falls, and Craig of the Creek have more character and story-driven jokes, along with some adult humor thrown in, but nothing too obvious, it's mostly just thrown in for the parents. And while they're all cartoons, the styles of humor and animation are very different from each other.
Duck season! Wabbit season! Duck season! Wabbit season! Duck season! Wabbit season! Wabbit season! Duck season! Wabbit season! I say it's duck season, and I say fire!
The Gravity Falls Museum of History.
You realize what this means, Mabel? We're gonna have to break in.
And those are your free Pioneer Day passes and your balloons, blue and pink.
We're in.
See what I mean? The Warner Bros. Cartoons seem like nothing but chaos, but there's actually a lot of thought and effort put behind it. They actually thought through what they were doing, and they stuck with it. They had discipline, as Chuck Jones put it. They have rules for the worlds and the characters. The jokes themselves follow a few principles. Almost everything has a classic expectation and subversion. Moving on to another old cartoon. Old, in big quotes. Anyone remember Tom and Jerry? Well, if you don't, get ready for a crash course. It's about a tomcat named Tom. You get it? Get it? You get it? Do you get it? And Jerry the mouse. There isn't a pun with this one, I'm sorry. Anyway, every episode with Tom and Jerry is actually very similar to an episode with Elmer Fudd and Bugs Bunny, or I guess more accurately it would be Roadrunner. This is because Tom is always trying to capture and eat Jerry, much like how Elmer Fudd does the same to Bugs, or how the coyote does so to Roadrunner. However, the big difference here, aside from species, is that Tom and Jerry has no dialogue in most of the episodes, and if it does, then it doesn't usually come from Tom or Jerry. Now, to be fair, Roadrunner ran along the same lines. What? What do you expect from a video analyzing comedy and cartoons? Anyway, Roadrunner was also mostly silent in the sense that there was no dialogue, but it did have a lot of really great music to help the story, much like Tom and Jerry. So, a lot of the principles between Roadrunner and Tom and Jerry are very similar. Anyway, Tom has a tendency to scream when he gets hurt. But I hardly think that counts in terms of dialogue. The music and the slapstick for Tom and Jerry is what really drives the show. It's always Tom's elaborate plans to catch Jerry that backfire. There's more expectations and subversions, of course. And, of course, there are exceptions, like when the two team up for one reason or another, or when one goes off on a journey of their own for whatever reason. Either way, the quick animation and fast pacing make for a great setup for this age-old classic. So, something I wanted to touch on before I move to more modern cartoons is I want to talk about characters in stories. I constantly hear things like, "You can't have a story without good characters!" and "Characters drive the story!" And, well, that isn't always true. It's mostly true for modern day because people will be more invested in something if they feel it's relatable, but things weren't always like that. I mean, look at these old cartoons, for example. All of the characters in Looney Tunes have very simple desires. There really isn't much character to them beyond their wants and the lengths they will go to get them. We don't see character development from any of these characters until the recent remake, which wasn't even going for the same feel as the old show. Tom and Jerry? If there is character development, it's self-contained in one episode, and it's usually one of the characters realizing they can't live without the other. Popeye himself has a lot of similar traits to old heroes from mythology. You know, the classic paragon heroic protagonist. There's a lot of them, and they all should have very similar traits with no variation aside from the setting of the story. They're all strong men and save the girl, and almost never get beaten unless it's to make them look cooler in the end when they come back and beat the person anyway. They also tend to be stubborn and smart and resilient to most attacks, again, unless it's meant to make them look cooler later on. And overall, they're just the good guy. If this description feels bland, that's because it is. Can you honestly tell me anything about the cartoon characters' basic traits or classical heroes aside from their family trees and their really cool weapons or abilities or whatever? Not convinced? Think about Perseus. No. Not the recent books. I'm talking about the original Perseus. He was all of those things from earlier, except he didn't lose a fight. There was no character development originally. He was just supposed to go out and fight some people and save a princess. Think about Beowulf. He also went out and fought some stuff, and he didn't save a princess, but he did become king eventually. There's also Odysseus, who shares the simple motive trait with the Looney Tunes characters, because he's literally just trying to get home while the gods try everything in their power to make it take as long as possible, maybe even stop him altogether if they can. All of these characters are well known, and their stories are, at least in my opinion, great. But their stories are, well, story-driven. Much like the older cartoons, they're driven by the action, the setting, the plot, not the characters. The characters are kind of just a side thing. They're just cookie cutter. You could switch them out and it really wouldn't make a difference. We don't know anything else about these characters aside from their basic traits, because everything else wasn't seen as plot relevant back in the day. It didn't move the story forward because the story wasn't necessarily about the character. It was about what the character did, not how they felt. Sure, we might know about their hubris or their rage, but that hardly counts as a character. Now, keep all of this in mind because the next 3 shows I talk about are going to be more modern shows, and thus more character-driven. The characters and how they feel, react, and grow are the main focus of the stories, and the plot's just kind of there to test the characters. Older stories, you could switch out the characters, and it probably wouldn't change much of what's happening. But newer stories, it's the setting and even parts of the plot that are interchangeable. In newer stories, we can actually see characters' reactions. We actually relate to them and how they feel. We get to know them and their sense of humors. Also, bit of a spoiler warning for everything I'm about to talk about /show. So Gravity Falls follows the Pines family and the people in Gravity Falls as they grow together in more ways than one. Now, the show itself gets a fair amount of attention for the amount of mysteries and ciphers that are involved, but the heart of the show is its characters. The way they grow and mature, and how relatable they are is what really draws people in, especially the way that they interact. The way they play off each other makes them feel so much more real. The humor of the show mostly plays off of the way the characters interact with each other. The way they react to situations and their environments, and each other. The way that Dipper and Mabel bicker sometimes like real siblings. Seeing how they play off of everything and also the running gags simply adds to the comical portions of the show. Craig of the Creek is another show that just started on Cartoon Network, and honestly, I cannot recommend it enough. The show seems to be something for kids to relate to, and for adults, or people our age, I guess, to reminisce about. The show follows Craig and his friends Kelsey and JP, where they go on adventures at their local creek. At the creek, it's kind of like Recess in the sense that there are kids who all play a part. There's cliques and an order to things. The show so far is episode to episode, with some silly, lighthearted fun, but also some more hints of serious notes and themes. But the humor of the show comes from how quirky these characters are and the things they do to have fun. The jokes are simple and fun, and the childlike humor is felt throughout the show. So, part of my research for this project was interviewing my dad. He grew up watching Looney Tunes and Popeye when it originally came out, and he still loves cartoons. We actually watched all of Gravity Falls and Phineas and Ferb, and Season 1 of Star vs. the Forces of Evil. And so he's got a good perspective having experienced the different sides of the spectrum.
All right, well, I was born in 1957. That was the year they sent a man-made object into orbit of this planet. That was the Russians with Sputnik. So I was born into an age of space travel and TV and all sorts of fun things. So when you're a kid, at that time there was a lot of things, fun things on TV. There were 3 channels, count them 3. There were, most of the stuff on TV was for adults. Even the humor was really, that was really for adults. It was only on Saturday mornings that you would get cartoons. Yeah, 3 channels, 3, 6, and 10, in the Philadelphia area. And, you get up in the morning, you get your chocolate frosted sugar bombs or whatever you wanted to eat, and sit and watch cartoons in the morning until your mom threw you out to go play. The ones that I always liked the best were the Bugs Bunny and the Roadrunner cartoons. They just seemed to be the best. They were just funny. There was slapstick. There was always something that Bugs was getting himself into. Not that he tried to, but he always ended up, somebody else would start it and he would finish it. The Roadrunner, the coyote would always, you would see it, you would wonder what was going to happen because you knew it wasn't going to work out the way that he thought, and then, oh wow, look at that. And that was funny. That was really all the kids had. I think the Three Stooges was more for adults, quite frankly. Well, the cartoons were always just sort of a one-shot deal. Somebody would come up with a situation, they would throw in some jokes and some things. Now the cartoons are a bit more episodic. They follow from one to the next. They don't necessarily get anywhere, but they just sort of run around and follow. I can't say which one's better. If you're following in order, I guess, you can kind of almost binge watch some of the more recent cartoons. I guess you could still do that with Bugs Bunny, but if you want to watch them all in series, that'd be kind of fun. Yeah, they're a bit different now in that they do tend to follow an episode or a plan or something like that somebody's laid out. And the trick, of course, is that you have to, if you set the plan, then you have to follow it. If you say there's no noise in space, there's no noise in space, which there isn't. If you say there is noise in space, like Star Wars does, then okay, well, there's noise in space. Things go boom, or whatever.
Except for that one time.
Yeah, well, yeah. So, but right, and that's the thing. You've got to be consistent. You've got to be logical in what you're doing. So consistency is very important. Once you set the story, once you set the background, you draw a cartoon character that has no mouth, and yet he makes noise. He talks and things like that. Of course, he's from Mars, but what are you gonna do? Questions?
Do you have any comments on current cartoons and their humor?
Yeah, actually, there have been some cartoons that I've actually enjoyed, especially watching with my daughter. Let's see, what were some of the ones that we've watched?
Phineas and Ferb.
Phineas and Ferb is good. They have the same thing they're doing every time, and that exactly how it's going to turn out and things like that. But they make the situation different each time and throw in music and do all sorts of different things. So it keeps your interest.
Yeah. Kind of sounds like the old Looney Tunes cartoons. And it's a similar situation every time, but they mix it up in just the right ways.
Right. Yeah. And just how those, what the joke is and what the gag is a little bit different each time, but it's still pretty funny. It gets your attention. Gravity Falls. Yeah. That one got me hooked. I don't know why. I just started watching. It's like, really? Kind of wondering to see what's going to happen next. It's like, where's this going? I don't understand what's happening. But it really caught my attention. I like that. I think that a lot. It certainly wasn't the same as Bugs Bunny or just sort of a sitcom, and then it had a sort of a plot and things were going on in the background. There were subplots and all sorts of things going on that were fairly, I guess, a little more advanced than you would have in a regular Bugs Bunny cartoon. But that was it really kept your attention using all the little plot devices that are available for something like that. I mean, there was a time in my life when cartoons were my life. I mean, you just live for Saturday. You just live for the cartoon mornings. It was either that or the all the sugar from the chocolate frosted sugar bombs, one or the other. But it was that was a big thing. Yeah. The first time I saw a cartoon, we were living overseas at the time. My father worked overseas, and the family was with him. And this was an area where a lot of folks spoke a language that I didn't speak. And one of the families in the camp was able to set up a TV. And at a certain time, at a certain day, they would broadcast a cartoon. And it was in the local language, of course. But by just simply watching what was going on, you could laugh along with the kids that knew what what the gag or what they were saying, and as the first time seeing that was just so amazing. It was just really, really neat. Um, it was being a kid and seeing something for the first time. It's like, wow, that's cool. And then we got back to America, and where we stayed, they actually had a TV, and that again, on Saturday mornings they broadcast the cartoons, and that was, and so that was pretty cool. I've always enjoyed that. A good cartoon is one that actually uses a lot of the techniques that you would find in regular theater or even a good book. You would find how they build a plot, that they establish characters, that there's a storyline, and then kind of goes up and down, and then has an ending, and then there's some jokes along the way. Doesn't usually get too serious, but it can be, if you follow the same sort of plot lines and that you would in a story, a book, a movie. That's what makes the cartoons, I think, interesting. That there's a couple things going on. Shakespeare I've always said that he, in addition to having probably the largest command of the English language of any person in history, he would also throw in extras. He would throw in, there would be a fight scene, and there would be high drama, and there would be, very high poetry, and then there would be a few dirty jokes, and and you throw all that together, and it made for a pleasant evening. You got to see that.
The water balloon war has taken a turn for the worst. Some kids just started filling garbage bags with water.
Oh, Craig, if I don't make it out of here.
No, don't say it, JP.
I gotta tell you, man, Bernard is a really great director!
No, he's not.
Meep, meep.
Hey, at least I'm not all keyed up to watch a kids show.
I'll have you know that Ducktective has a big mystery element and a lot of humor that goes over kids' heads.
Jones believed it wasn't enough to just watch movies. You had to have interests outside of film. You had to study real life. Most of all, he encouraged this.
Reading. Read everything. It doesn't do you much good to draw unless you have something to draw. And the only place you can get anything to draw is from out of that head. And the only way that you can exercise the mind is by bringing new ideas to it, so it'll be surprised.
Yes?
And say, God, I didn't know that. That's the greatest thing in the world. Gee, I didn't know that. And there you are,